Steel Curtain Network.
Por Jorgito! Going down! Najee Harris! DJ Watt!
What is up, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, and welcome back to another Steelers post-game show. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Dave Schofield. No Brian Davis today, and this wraps up our preseason coverage as the Steelers lose to the Detroit Lions on the road in Ford Field, 24-17 to the Lions to finish the preseason 0-3. We're going to break it all down for you right here, but joining me, Dave, what's up?
Hey, not too much, Jeff. Just after watching a nice first quarter and partially into the second quarter, seeing what we wanted to see from the Steelers top unit, there wasn't much to really watch or cheer about after that. But if you were really wanting to see the first group do what you wanted them to do, regardless of who was on the field for the other team, you can't control that, then they did what they needed to do on both sides of the ball to start the game.
Is there a bigger tease than like the final preseason game where you get maybe like a quarter of competitive play and then all of a sudden it's just like empty the benches and you get these fringe players who are just trying to get another contract in some way, whether it's with another team, whether it's on the practice squad, something. It is tough to watch. Like the second half of this game was a really tough watch. Nonetheless, the Steelers, as Dave mentioned, they did come out strong. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the starters, what you deem starters. And like Dave said, I do want to mention this. You can't control, the Steelers cannot control who the Detroit Lions play and who they don't. All they can do is go out and make plays. It's exactly what they did in the first quarter, even into the second quarter. But we always start this show the same way. I want to continue with that trend. Dave, your knee-jerk reaction following the game was what?
My knee-jerk reaction was, although, you're looking at the very end with Ryan Watts going down and what they say they hope is just a stinger, you really wanted to see people coming out of this game healthy as much as anything. So the fact that, although I said I was fine if they would have played TJ and Cam and those guys for, one series, which would have been, I think, a whole total of 6 plays, probably wouldn't have even been 6 plays if those guys were out there, perhaps. They didn't play them at all, which I was fine with as well. So the fact that those guys are healthy and ready to go is good. So you got to remember that the Steelers, they held out some key defenders as well. I like the fact that the Steelers gave Justin Fields a drive with the starting offensive line. So each quarterback had one. But my knee-jerk reaction is really excited that they did what they needed to do on both sides of the ball early on. And then when it was into a bunch of people fighting for their playoff lives, my goodness, especially when it comes to the Steelers tackles, they have their top 4 tackles. 2 of them were out injured. So when the other 2 were out, you were scraping the bottom of the barrel, and you could tell.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a situation where with my knee-jerk reaction was I saw enough. I wish I could have seen more, but I saw enough to at least make me think, okay, we'll talk about the offensive line, but they did their job and they scored points. They put 2 touchdowns on the board. A lot of people, that's what they wanted to see. That doesn't mean the game was perfect. Obviously, there was still a fumble, actually more than one fumble. There was still issues with tackling and the second string and the third and fourth strings that are out there. But nonetheless, the Steelers, I thought, did take a step in the right direction heading into the regular season. I think hopefully the first quarter will calm some nerves of the Pittsburgh Steelers faithful out there as they think about week 1 in Atlanta. But let's start off with the quarterback position, as we always do, as we break down the game by the numbers. Dave, first question. Were you surprised Russell Wilson only played 1 drive?
Well, I wonder if the Steelers kind of made their decision that, you know what, if we score a touchdown on our first drive, we're just going to that's going to be it for Russ. And that's what happened. Now, it wasn't a ton of plays. They might have just decided, you know what, they did it good enough. Here's the thing that got me with Russ out there. You had to play his first completion to Pickens, which looked like it was going to go for about 7 yards and a first down, ended up actually being a 6-yard loss.
Right.
And I thought to myself, that's the second play of the game. Loved the first play of the game. The line's pushing, Najee's chugging. It's his only touch of the game. They get 5 yards just by bullying their way halfway to the first down. But then that second play, I'm like, this is the one that's going to get him. This is the play that's going to get him, and it's going to set him back because it's 3rd and 11. He's not going to have time to throw. And my goodness, do I think that the Steelers' offensive line will be able to hold every defense's starting group to where there's a clean pocket for that long all the time? No. But they did it in that moment, and it shows how important it was for Russell Wilson to have time to hit George Pickens on that play. So ultimately, Russell Wilson, I'm just trying to give everything about that whole first drive going. Surprised that they pulled him after only throwing 2 passes? Maybe a little, but I also don't blame them to say, hey, we've shown that we can move it. Let's check it off. Because if you come up there and then look bad on the next one, then you don't have a lot to build from either.
Yeah, and I read an article, I think it ran yesterday, no idea. I lose track. But it was all about, I went and got all these quotes from Russell Wilson, from Justin Fields, from Arthur Smith, from Mike Tomlin, and on about how great this unit has been practicing. And that's both with Russell Wilson at the helm and Justin Fields. And Mike Tomlin, they all said they just need to put it together and put it on the field in an in-game setting, in-stadium setting, whatever you want to call it. And I felt like the Steelers looked at it and said that finally, this is what we've been waiting to see. This is what they've been doing. Big plays, the big play to George Pickens down the sideline, which set him up. And then obviously they take care of business with Cordero Patterson running it in 31 yards for a touchdown. But I think that Russell Wilson, from a Steelers perspective, they saw enough. It kind of validated what they've seen in practice, and therefore they were good. So let's go to Justin Fields now, because I do want to read the stat line for Russell Wilson. 2 of 2 for 26 yards, 13-yard average. He had a 118.8 rating. Now Justin Fields takes over. He ends up going 3 of 4. I think he had 2 drives himself. He throws for 40 yards, a 10-yard average, no touchdowns, no interceptions, was sacked twice, a 106.2 rating. Dave, what did you think about Justin Fields' time at the helm?
All right. Well, first of all, the snap coming way early, that was not on Fields. He was still calling out everything. I think there was something. They had just brought in Spencer Anderson for Isaac Seumalo. They're running the silent count. Mm-hmm. I think he tapped Frazier in a way that wasn't supposed to signify the silent count, but Frazier thought it was. That there something went haywire there. That wasn't on Fields, so I know it goes down as a fumble for him, and I assume that was one of the sacks. But that just was what it was. I liked that pass he fired to Michael Pruitt. That seemed like he just was that the infamous hit his back foot and let it rip.
Yep.
Is that kind of what you were talking about when
Exactly.
you were saying that, when you've referred to that before? Yeah. That's what I thought of there. That's the play that really set that up. Yes, they had a short field because of the strip sack, but hey, they did what they had to do and got it in the end zone. And then that second drive, I would have really liked to have seen what they would have done on a 3rd and 4 had they properly executed a snap when the quarterback was actually looking at the ball.
Yeah, and the funny thing is even when they showed the replay, and this, of course, when it made its rounds on Twitter, you can see Justin Fields is motioning to a receiver. His eyes are not on the center, and then the ball comes up, and I was absolutely stunned as I'm saying, obviously that's a center. It was a silent count. He was told clearly, like, hey, he was told or thought, like you said, Zach Frazier thought he was supposed to snap the ball, and he snapped it too early. And there's people online saying that's clearly on Fields. How? He's not even looking at the center. How would that be on the quarterback?
It was all they're trying to do the silent count. Exactly. This was Zach Frazier's really. They were playing at home the first 2 games.
Yeah.
So this was their first opportunity to do that, and it seemed to be fine with Isaac Seumalo. But you have to realize, because if you all remember back, Ramon Foster's who I think of first whenever you hear about that silent count of him tapping Marquise Pouncey to get that going, and then and have it work in the way that it's supposed to work. It was the first time. It was where they came in with a different guard set up, and you don't want to see those things, but that's just a description of what happened.
Right. Yeah. I mean, people want to blame Fields for that. Fine. Like, you have every right to do that. I just adamantly disagree with your take then because he wasn't even ready for it. But I thought Justin Fields, That throw, and there were a couple beat reporters and people that have been at training camp said that overthrow where, you're talking about a tight end down the seam over the linebacker. It's a tough throw, but they say he's been hitting that throw all training camp. And it was the first time finally that he let it rip in a game, and it was completed to Michael Pruitt. It was a beautiful play. It was a great throw. And I think it's some of those plays where you're like, maybe that's what we're finally waiting to see. But I don't think there's any controversy here in regards to who's going to start in week 1. I think it's Russell Wilson's job. Dave, you agree?
Yeah. I mean, barring him not having to push a sled again, and having something like that happen. Yeah. It seems that he's healthy. Yeah. As long as he's healthy. And right now there's, other than genuine, just general practice stuff, there's no reason to think that he wouldn't be. That they're gonna start off with Russ.
The only thing I also want to say about the quarterback position is John Reese Plumlee, J.R. Plumlee, the dude finally gets a chance to play quarterback, and he completes that pass to Quez Watkins on 3rd down, and you're like, yes, this is it. And then the local boy gets called for illegible.
Your alma mater.
That's right.
It's those Shepherd boys.
Shepherd grad. He gets called for ineligible man downfield. And so, okay, they're going to go for it. And what does it set up? A 4th and 2, I think. And then it's a false start.
It was a 4th and 3. That moved it back to a 4th and 8. And then they were still going to go for it.
And then there's a false start. And it's just like, gosh darn it. Like Plumlee has been doing nothing but special teams work in preseason games. He finally gets a chance to play the quarterback role, and he goes 3 for 4, 32 yards with a 97.9 average or rating. I'm sorry, but still, I was glad he got an opportunity. I don't think he has a spot on this team per se, unless it's as a practice squad guy. And even then it doesn't make much sense. We've talked about that before.
Well, because he's offers more than just quarterback would be why he could then he would be a reasonable guy for the practice squad, because my goodness, he's played as have you ever seen a guy take a kickoff return out to like the 40-some yard line and then run right back out on the field to be the quarterback?
That's true. That was right after. It was a nice return.
So kick punt returns, playing other special teams, was in at wide receiver at some point, I think. If nothing else in camp, if he's on the practice squad, it's not just because it's not as strictly a quarterback.
Yeah. And I will say, I had some people saying, like, why isn't Plumlee why are they putting him out on special teams so much? And really they're trying to give him every opportunity to make the team. If he could play gunner on special teams, like they desperately need gunners on special teams. If he could fill that role, be a backup return man. And hey, you now have a spot on the 53-man roster. It's not going to be as a quarterback, unfortunately, but nonetheless, good to see him at least get a shot and get a chance. We'll see what happens from here. Let's go to the running game. The Steelers did not run the ball well. Outside of Cordero Patterson's 31-yard touchdown run, it was not pretty. They total as a team 78 yards on 24 carries, a 3.3-yard average. But they do have 2 rushing touchdowns. I mentioned Patterson, and LaMichael Pirine scores a touchdown. He was the leading rusher outside of Patterson, 6 carries for 16 yards. Dave, what do you think about the running game?
Yeah. There was a nice run by Najee Harris, the first play of the game.
Yep.
That's the main thing that I take away there, because everything else is just not as much what you're going to see during the regular season.
Shoot, Patterson's
run
was awesome.
Patterson, yeah, it's nice to see that Patterson come in. I mean, he takes the first handoff, he loses 2. Yep. He just wanted to have his next run be for more than 30. So what it was, they were at the 29, moving to the 31. But man, the blocking by the left side of the line there from center out on that touchdown was great. I know some people don't, everyone's like, even myself, I'm like, hey, Frazier, Sayamalu, wow. But people don't want to give credit to Dan Moore, but he had a nice block on that too. Yeah. So that was that. I mean, he wasn't touched. So yes, you didn't have your starters out there. Would it be good to see them doing that against somebody like Hutchinson out there? Sure. But all you can do is block the guys that are lined up against you. So it was nice to see that Patterson could be could be a viable third running back option and also be their kick returner. Like Coach Tomlin keeps saying, I don't need to see him. I don't need to see him. We know what we can do. We need to see what other people can do. So that, to me, especially with him busting off that run today, for people that were thinking, well, does he even have a spot on this team? I think that kind of secured that talk.
I agree with that. And the one thing about Patterson too that I was excited to see was that no, he wasn't touched, but it wasn't. He did some of that himself with that one cut that eluded a tackler, and then he went untouched in the end zone. So it was a great hole by the whole left side of the offensive line. But when he made that cut, I was like, okay, I think he's fully healthy. That's one of those plays that, he was on the non-football injury list to start camp. It took him a while to get back and going. I think it was week 1 preseason when he was activated off that list. He didn't play in that game, but still, you want to make sure you're fully healthy. And for a veteran like him, that one cut, I was like, okay, this guy might be a viable option to help bolster the running back room. Now, Dave, I want to ask you, did any of those, we'll call them, let's say, the top 3 of Najee, Jalen, and Cordero Patterson, did any of the other running backs like a P. Ryan stand out that you're thinking maybe they could keep 4 running backs? And if so, this guy might be it.
I would say it would right now. I would give, based on the in-stadium play, it would be P. Ryan. Didn't really get to see much of Edwards. Did Ward even play this time? He didn't play last week. I don't think he did. I didn't see that he was out, but I didn't see that he didn't get a carry or anything. No. So I don't even know that he came on the field. Honestly, I think the biggest thing is who the Steelers get to the practice squad, because with the call-up rules and everything else, I could see the Steelers keeping at least, I think they're going to keep at least 2 running backs on the practice squad, and that might have been what people were fighting for. I'm not sure they're going to keep 4, even though I'd like to see him keep a fullback. I'm not sure that Coletto is going to get a spot either.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I agree. Let's go to the receiving core. The Pittsburgh Steelers receivers, they throw for 166 total yards, 15.1 average, only 11 catches. Dez Fitzpatrick with 2 for 64. George Pickens, 2 for 26 with a long of 32. That doesn't add up. It's because of the wide receiver screen that was a negative gain.
Minus 6.
Yeah, so he...
Well, that was all Russell Wilson's yards too. You look at that, like Russell Wilson, 26 yards with a long of 32.
Absolutely, yeah. Michael Pruitt, 1 for 22. Van Jefferson, 2 for 18. Jeray Jenkins got in on the mix, 1 for 17. Quez Watkins, 1 for 10. Could have had a second one if not for the ineligible man downfield. What did you think about the pass catchers here, Dave?
Well, something we got to say about Quez Watkins. It's you and I haven't had him on our 53-man prediction for a while. That does not bode well that you're the wide receiver that they're going to when the 4th quarterback is throwing passes. It really isn't. I'll be honest with you, the person that intrigues me the most that I think could be a surprise choice to this roster could be a Dez Fitzpatrick, because I think he could offer special teams play, much like you got from Miles Boykin. I don't know if they had him out there in this game at all as a gunner, but that's something he could potentially do. It was nice to see him pulling that pass. Were you worried for a second on that Fitzpatrick pass that they were going to call offensive because they were they were hand fighting? I'm like, just don't call that offensive. And when they show the replay, you could see that it was defensive if it was going to be anything. But it really didn't matter because he made the play. Biggest gain of the day on that play. But overall, for the pass catchers, it didn't seem like the Steelers were taking sacks because the quarterbacks were looking downfield and no one was open. I'm not looking downfield. I'm looking at the blocking of the quarterback. That's what I'm looking at. The blocking and the quarterback in those situations. So to me, when the quarterback's holding the ball, it means that they don't trust that guys are open. I didn't see them holding onto the ball too long, so I'm assuming that meant guys were actually getting open.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I didn't think there were a lot of coverage sacks in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the receiving core did fine. I can't think of any drop passes. Scotty Miller had one that hit the turf. I'm not sure if that was a bad throw. I didn't get a good angle on it, but still, no, it just wasn't a good offensive game really after the Justin Fields and Russell Wilson left the game. But we talk about pressure and sacks surrendered. Let's talk about the offensive line now. They do surrender 4 sacks for 29 yards. They don't run the ball well. What do you think about the offensive line, Dave? Even though you mentioned the tackles were extremely thin. There was a sack on Justin Fields where I had to look at the 90-man roster because I see Broderick Jones and everyone's picking on him in a play, but it was the whole left side of the line that
it was the
failed to
left
block.
side.
And I'm like, who is this guy? And I had to look it up. I can't
Like
remember.
Hamilton, I think was his last name or something. Yeah, I'd look it up too.
It was I'll look it up as you talk about it. But what did you think about the offensive line?
I thought that the offensive line, the first unit, did a nice job. Did a very nice job, particularly run blocking. I felt that once even Isaac Seumalo came out of there, Spencer Anderson did not have the best game. He had the issue with the snap, but then they had put him at tackle, and he gave up a sack where he just let the guy dive right in front of his face and get to the quarterback. That one was pretty bad. But then again, this is a guy trying to play in essence 5 different positions along the offensive line. I'm not sure that tackle is his strong suit, but at the same time, the Steelers got to know what they have with some other guys that aren't available right now. But yeah, when the strip sack actually is from your own player knocking the ball out of your hand, because that was the left tackle.
It was Devery
that
Hamilton.
Hit the ball.
That's it. That's his name, Devery Hamilton.
Yes.
Both plays were on him. That's not a good way to make it.
He hit the ball. He got driven back, and it was when Kyle Allen went to throw it. That's who hit the ball was his own player. I put a tweet out there at halftime that I said about that with the tackles that they two weren't playing in this game. The other 2 have wisely been taken out. And what they had after that was not good. So I did not have high expectations for the Steelers offense in the second half for that reason, because the second half of the second quarter, or even a majority of, I don't know exactly when it was when I look at the clock, they couldn't really do much because of the play they were getting at offensive tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those situations where it is hard to gauge. You just try to focus on the players that you know are going to be there. And let's be honest, we still don't know who's going to be there in week 1. Is it going to be Troy Fautano on the right side? And what are they going to do with Broderick Jones? He has had his struggles this preseason. Do they keep him at right and not put Troy Fautano in at right tackle immediately and let him kind of rehab and get more acclimated? This is going to be interesting how they shuffle the offensive line, although I do think the interior is set with Seumalo, Frazier, and Daniel. So we'll see how that pans out. Dave, any other final thoughts on the offense before we go to the defensive side?
Well, I was just going to say, some people were saying about Broderick Jones. I did not think that Broderick Jones played quote unquote that bad this game. It was definitely an improvement from last week, particularly in the run game. I mean, he did all right with the run game last week too. Some people were like, oh, he gave up. No, he did give up some ground on the one time when he was on the right side, but it was really the left side that it collapsed to. I think it was a Justin Field sack. He had to step away from the pressure on the left and basically stepped right up into where Jones was blocking. I didn't think that Jones, like I said, I didn't come out of this saying, wow, he played great, but I didn't come out of it in the same regard, especially the last game.
Yeah, I agree. So the offense, we'll see. That's good. A lot of it's going to hinge on that as we prepare for week 1. If you're listening to us on the podcast side, on the audio only feed, we're going to take a break. We're going to have our sponsors give us a few words here, and we're going to hear an ad break for those that are watching live on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. Don't go anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We're going to be talking defense right after this break. All right, we are back. Thank you all for your patience. Let's get started talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Before we get started and dive into that, our good friend Felicia chimes in and gives us a $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Felicia. And she says, our defense be defensive, but OMG, the offense is so offensive.
Hey, Felicia.
Yeah, for those who don't know why Dave says that at the end of every preview, that's why. So, yeah, thank you for the tip, Felicia. We do appreciate it. And the defense did play well. I mean, my gosh, the first group, if you want to call it the first group, not the starters, because there was no Cam Hayward. There was no TJ Watt. There was no Alex Highsmith.
There was no Joey Porter.
No, Patrick Queen played sparingly at the beginning of the game. So did
Landon Roberts about the same amount. Yeah.
I don't think, did Minka play?
I think Minka played. But I don't think they had Minka doing Minka things.
No,
I think
I don't
Minka
either.
was just back there chilling, if you know what I
Helping
mean.
to get everyone lined up and then he's getting off the field.
Doing that part of things that he does so great that sometimes isn't noticed.
Yeah.
But I think he did. I mean, a lot of times the safety's not even in the picture. So maybe someone else can say it. Maybe he didn't play. I'm not sure.
I don't know. When it comes to preseason success on the defensive side, we used to do we used to have like awards, like we used to do it at Behind the Steel Curtain. We called it the Isaac Redman Award. I feel like we should have a Tuzar Skipper Award, which is just like, hey, this guy had the best preseason. So far, for the second year in a row, I'd probably have to give it to Nick Herbig because the guy just continues in the preseason to dominate. He had another phenomenal game. I want to let's talk about the pass rush first. Hendon Hooker was sacked 5 times. But Dave, you'd have to look up the stats by like quarter/half. I want to say all 5 of those sacks happened in like the first 2 quarters, the first half of the game. And are you able to find that?
They were all in the first half.
Yeah, all in the first half.
4 of the 5 were in the first quarter. 3 of them were in a row.
Yeah, that's true. Julius Welschoff, he's the German guy. He's had 2 sacks. Nick Herbig had 2 sacks. Corey Trice. I'm sorry, those are tackle for losses. But no, still, we're good. They both had 2 sacks, and then there were a half sack between Leal and Keanu Benton to round out the 5 with 6 quarterback hits. What was really depressing was there was this huge sack party in the first half. And then in the second half, it was the same pressure, but let me start over. In the first half, Hooker had nowhere to go. There was the pressure from the interior from Ogunjobi. Loudermilk did a good job. Keanu Benton was there. Montravius Adams. And then they just pinned him in. In the second half, they did have some pressure on the edge, but he was able to step up. There was no interior pressure, and he's able to run. And that is when Hendon Hooker did his damage in terms of leading the entire Detroit Lions and rushing with 10 carries for 93 yards. So, Dave, what do you think about the pass rush?
Well, it's almost like Jeff Hartman reads my tweets, because I don't know if he really does or not. But because one of the things that I said was the biggest difference I saw on defense from the first half to the second half was getting home on the sacks and not letting the quarterback escape. That was the difference from first half to second half, because in the second half he took off and was running for first downs. In the first half, he was getting finished. He was getting sacked because you were basically had the whole defensive front winning. There was nowhere to escape to because they were all there, and almost any of them could have gotten a sack at any given time, it seemed like. So I thought the pass rush was great in the first half, even without your 2 biggest pass rushers not playing again, meaning your outside linebackers. And I felt in the second half, that's pretty much the difference of why they gave up what they gave up yardage wise in the second half, which was, I think, a ridiculous, like 246 yards in the second half, something like that. So that's, to me, that was the difference. So how much do you actually want to say you care about the pass rush in the second half when a lot of those guys aren't going to be on this team come Wednesday?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. I'm curious, and I want to get your take on this. And we'll be doing our 53-man, our last prediction on Monday. What do they do with a guy like DeMarvin Leal, who's basically an outside edge rusher now? Does he find his spot there, and do they not go with a Kyron Johnson or a Jeremiah Moon? What are your thoughts there?
Well, Jeremiah Moon being out, not playing in this game
help.
was not helpful there. Maybe kind of like I wonder if he's getting the Logan Lee treatment, because Logan Lee did not play in this game due to injury, which almost makes it seem like it's a little bit more likely to get them to the practice squad.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's where Jeremiah Moon was for part of the year last year with Baltimore. The thing with Leal, and I wrote this article for SteelCurtainNetwork.com this week. I'm like, do the Steelers need to keep 7 defensive linemen? It seems like it's been ingrained in our mind that that's what they should do now because they've done it for the last 3 years. But for years and years before that, it was 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. That's what they did. They kept 6 defensive linemen. But then when you had these young guys you were developing, it was 7. Well, if Leal can kind of be used as both, then you don't need to keep 7 and 5 with him being just one or the other. Or in essence, you are keeping 7 and 5 with a total of 11 players because Leal was counting towards both. That's what he can give you. But bottom line is, DeMarvin Leal has had a really good preseason, and I'm not questioning whether or not he's going to make this team. The question is, how are they going to use him, and does he offer depth somewhere else that they might not have otherwise? But also remember, outside linebacker is a very popular position to have guys on the team just for special teams.
That's true. That is true. Let's get to some super chats here. Felicia gives us another $2. Thank you very much. She said, I want a Nick H jersey. I need Bad's China supplier. I'm sure if you reach out to Brian Anthony Davis, he'll hook you up and find you a Nick Herbig jersey on the cheap. That's what Brian does. All right, let's go to Dennis Pavlik. I want to get your take on this, Dave. He gave us $5. Thank you for the tip. We appreciate it. He said, Tomlin should have challenged that fumble. His knee was on the guy's leg. So this is something I noticed as well. We didn't get a great look at the replay because it was the Detroit Lions feed, but we're talking fourth quarter, receiver made a play, was fighting for extra yardage. As he's going down, the ball comes out. Steelers clearly recover. And as I watched the replay, I could have swore, again, we don't see a great replay, that the receiver's knee who had possession of the football never touched the ground. He hit the defensive back's leg, and then the ball comes loose. I thought it was worth a challenge. Do you remember that play, and what was your take?
Honestly, I don't remember that play. I really don't, because of the Detroit feed. You're not really seeing very much of it. And honestly, that could very well have been what was going on with the Steelers, is that they couldn't get a very good look at it either to challenge it. And there's a difference between taking a shot on a challenge like that in a preseason game versus the race. I'm not saying he shouldn't have. I'm just saying sometimes if it's a key possession down, change in possession down during a regular season game, even if you don't get the best look at it, it might be worth doing the challenge then. But being on the road in the preseason where you don't have as much at your disposal to make that decision, I didn't even know about it until Dennis put it in there, honestly.
Yeah, I tweeted it out. I was like, this should be a fumble, because I saw it and they only showed it, I think, one time. And I think the announcers, which, man, were those guys dull. Sorry, but there was just no life in the broadcast at all. They're like, oh, well, that kind of, wonder if his knee didn't hit the ground, and it was gone. So maybe someone catches it on social media. If they do, I'll find it and I'll put it on there. But still, interesting thought there. But Dave, what did you think about the secondary? When you look at the numbers for Detroit, they didn't pass the ball particularly well. Total of 174 yards from both quarterbacks, Hooker and Jake Fromm. The receiving core, Maurice Alexander had 4 catches for 60 yards. They hit a bunch of receivers. What did you think? I just always felt that Hendon Hooker was beating them with his legs, not his arm. What was your take on the secondary?
I mean, it was really where Detroit did their damage was on the ground. And the Steelers give up some yards in the passing game? Yeah, but it was when were they doing it? When I was like, oh, so-and-so didn't make that play. Let me look up their jersey number and actually see who that is. Those were the moments that I felt that the Steelers were giving up passing plays. Now, they did give up a third and short conversion on the first drive that they got that ball out so quick. I was like, man, Herbig almost had a sack there. Well, then what did he do? He got a sack on the next play, and then they got another sack, and then he got a strip sack, and so that wasn't much. So they didn't do much. If you look at it, they didn't give up much in the air at all with the quote unquote first unit of the day out there. I mean, my goodness, Detroit had 7 net yards in the first quarter. 7 net yards on 13 plays. Okay. They had 14 rushing yards. So what does that tell you they had for passing yards? -7 because of all the sacks. So I had no problem with the first unit guys out there. And when it was guys that, like I said, I was trying to look up their names. It's kind of, I would have liked to have seen them done better, but it is what it is.
When I look at who the Steelers played, who the Lions played, when they played, meaning the first quarter mainly, the Steelers defense did exactly what I wanted them to do. They stymied them. I mean, it was maybe, I remember a couple conversions and that was it. A lot of sacks, a lot of pressure. They dictated to the Lions what they were going to do. And so I liked it. I thought the secondary was, well, it was a secondary part because the front was getting such good push. Now, I do want to talk about the running defense because the second half was brutal. I mean, it was brutal. The Detroit Lions end up rushing for 187 yards. Hendon Hooker has 93 of those. Jake Funk, 40 of those. Jamar Jefferson, he has 2 touchdowns on 29 yards. The Steelers, there's a part of me that sometimes wishes that missed tackles were an actual statistic, but then there's times where I wish it wasn't because it would be ridiculous how many missed tackles we would see. Yeah. Dave, what was your take on the run defense in this game?
It was good in the first quarter.
Yeah.
It was good when the main guys were out there. It was all right to start the second quarter until those last 2 possessions. Then it just kind of fell off a cliff. You know what was surprising to me? I gave him kudos last week because he had had real nice pass coverage, and it was something that he had struggled against. I expected a lot better run defense from Mark Robinson the last 2 games.
Yeah.
And if that's his bread and butter and that's his strength, and all Buffalo did in the second half was run. And pretty much what Detroit was doing in the second half was run. Although they weren't all designed run plays. A number of them were also quarterback escaping. That was a little bit concerning. I felt the run defense, when you're talking about the top unit going into the season, what we are going to see here on September what day is it? 8th? Yeah, 8th. I'm fine with that, but the rest of it after that was the reason why they didn't win this game.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. I put this on Twitter because I honestly have no idea. I watched this preseason and I still have a question, which is who in the hell is going to be the Steelers slot cornerback in week 1?
Oh, yeah.
Because Beanie Bishop didn't play until like the second half.
They didn't play until the second half.
Mike Tomlin was very adamant that he has not done enough to make them feel confident or comfortable in what he can bring to the team. Cam Sutton is the answer, but not until week 9 after he's suspended for the first 8 weeks of the season.
And he's been playing safety.
I know. And he had an interception, which is good. And that's what Sean Manahan says. And he gives us $5. Said Cam Sutton got a pick. I'm sure that was satisfying for him being in Detroit for sure. Thank you for the tip, Sean. We appreciate it. What do you think, Dave? What do you think is going to be? What do you think they're going to do at slot cornerback? They have no answer, in my opinion.
I think that's one of the things that don't be surprised. We should do an over-under, Jeff. How many players are going to be on the Steelers 53-man roster week 1 who aren't currently member of the Pittsburgh Steelers right now?
I would set that line at 2.5.
That's the line I would set as well. Exactly. 2.5. 2.5. And you know what? I think I'll take the over. I think there's going to be 3.
Really?
I think that's one of the places where you could see it. It's not that they don't see value in guys like a Thomas Graham or a Beanie Bishop, but they also aren't the answers either to start things off. So we'll see how things play out and where they're looking for other things. I would not be surprised for the Steelers to be very active in even trade discussions or scouring players potentially getting cut over the next 2 days.
Yeah, the trend in the NFL is I'm not going to wait. The teams, if they have targeted a player that they think is going to be cut and they talk to that general manager, they say, what's it going to take for this guy to get to our team without having to be released and all that stuff that needs to take place. So we've done this on the Steelers preview, Dave. How many years in a row have they made trades during camp / the preseason? It's been a lot. It's been a lot of years, right?
It's very rare. I got to find my notebook and find the right page. It's been very rare that it hasn't happened.
Has not happened. Yes, exactly.
It hasn't happened. I mean, I think I went back to 2017 and I think there was 1 year that there wasn't any trades. One.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just they only did one rather than multiple, because a lot of times it's multiple.
You know, the one thing I think, since we're talking about like that slot corner position, the one thing I wonder is if the Steelers go nickel, do they use Deshaun Elliott in that role? And then if they go dime, there were reports that they were using Corey Trice in that role. but Corey Trice suffered a groin injury in this game. Although Mike Tomlin downplayed the significance of the injury, that could possibly keep him out. That to me is kind of, I don't know if I'm comfortable with using Deshaun Elliott in the nickel and Corey Trice in the dime. Someone in the live chat suggested Chandon Sullivan. I'm not sure if he's still available. If he is,
The last time I checked, he did, unless he got signed by someone without really anyone with that covers the Steelers reporting it.
yeah. So I don't know. That's going to be a position to watch. Everyone wants to talk about wide receiver 3. I look at the slot cornerback position and think that's the bottom of the barrel. I mean, that is Eric Rowe still available? Get him in because he could probably do better than most people could. I don't know. But did you find your page?
No, I'm trying to remember exactly where it was to see what the last time was. They didn't do any of those trades. I know it's here somewhere. That's the problem. I have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks of stuff, but none of it's in any semblance of order other than chronological when I used it.
And that's okay. That is okay. So, all right, let's talk special teams before we call it a show. And special teams kicking game was fine. There were no penalties on, like we saw.
Found it.
Oh, he found it.
2020, they didn't make any trades during training camp because there was no preseason games.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah, so there was no trades in that one. But yeah, they did going back to 2017. I didn't go before that.
Got it. So with special teams, you looked at Detroit. Detroit's kicker on the new kickoff rules had 2 penalties against him. One, the ball did not land in the landing zone, and one he kicked out of bounds. The Steelers did not have those, so that's a good thing. It was interesting also to see different philosophies. I think it was Matthew Wright in the second half had a really good kick, which was like a squib, but it landed in the landing zone and actually bounced twice before it was fielded. And so when the ball lands is when the players can go. That's going to be the ideal way in trying to kick those type of kicks to get your kicking coverage team. Because I think the coverage teams for the Steelers, both on kickoffs and punts, are really, really lacking. I don't know what they're lacking. I'm not going to pretend like this is what they need. You hear people talking about how they miss a James Pierre, they miss a Miles Boykin, the guys that were gunners that could get down the field and really, make something happen, at least move the person off their kick, the returner that is. I don't know, Dave, what do you think about the special teams?
Well, the penalties sucked. I mean, come on. In the first half, the Steelers had 2 penalties, 2 accepted penalties, because they had a defensive offsides that when Detroit had a nice game and they didn't accept it. Both penalties were on special teams. A false start on an extra point, and an illegal block on a kick return. This is not good. You need your special teams. Let's just say this. You don't often win a game because of your special teams, but you can lose them. Is the best way to think of your special teams. You don't have to win the game on special teams. You just need to not lose the game on special teams. So that was the biggest concern I had because of the penalties, which, I mean, the specialists were fine. Hunter was fine. Both Boz and Wright both did a nice job because Boz did the extra points in the first half, right?
Yes,
but it was Wright that had the field goal.
Correct.
So the specialists were fine in my regard, but the units covering stuff, you've just got to be cleaner than that.
Yeah, and you could definitely see with Cameron Johnston punting, there was a different philosophy. They're in a dome. He wasn't trying to just kill the ball. I think it was last week against Buffalo. He averaged over 55 yards per punt. This week, only 45.8. Probably trying to go for just more hang time. He did have 3 punts inside the 20, and some of them were inside the 15. I really wish they would also just have it. They have inside the 10, 20 and then inside the 10 like that. I feel like that's such a better and more telling statistic, but I guess beggars can't be choosers.
Well, here I can, let's see, obtained from punt. Let's see, Detroit's drives that were obtained from a punt. I can tell you all of them. They started at their own 20, their own 36, their own 28, their own 12, their own 8, their own 14.
Nice. So he had 3.
So they had 4 20 and in, and then 3 inside the 15 and 1 inside the 10.
Good. Love it. So we'll see. I think that when we talk about things like slot cornerback and who's going to be the finishing out the wide receiver depth chart, they're also going to be special teams players. And so that's going to play a role in this as well. So
Yeah.
I think when we talk about, okay, second half offense, defense, they're also emptying the bench for the special teams units because they want to give those players every chance to try and prove their worth. So you're not going to have a Nick Herbig, who will be a special teams ace for this team, on those units in the second half of a third preseason game because there's no need to. You know what he can do. Tyler Matakevich didn't play in this game. He's also, if he makes the team, going to be a special teams ace. So we'll see. We don't want to draw some drastic conclusions. But, Dave, let's wrap. Let's put a bow on this. And what were your final thoughts on this game in terms of where the Steelers are heading into the regular season?
My thoughts on this game was, did the Steelers finish 0-3 in this preseason based on this performance today? Yes, they did, unfortunately. Did I see what I wanted to see out of the first units of who was playing on the field, regardless of what number unit they were going against the other team, just whatever they did against who was on the field? I did like what I saw. Now, does that make me feel like everything is good, fine, grand squared away, and there's nothing to worry about? No. I'm not letting the first units in this game pull what many Steelers fans felt in 2020 in the second half against the Colts, when the Steelers had turned into a mess and they turned it around for one half in order to win a game and get in the playoffs. And then some people thought everything was fine when really it wasn't. And we saw that when the playoffs came around. I'm not saying everything's fine. I'm just saying that unlike the first two games where I didn't like what I saw out of the first offensive unit, today I did. And that's my biggest takeaway from this one. I often say you want to look at that first quarter, look at the first quarter score in the preseason games. That's going to tell you the most about stuff. So I do like what I saw with that. And then to me, maybe it's the infamous Chuck Noll quote: "Are you going to have problems when it comes to cutting players?" Well, I'm not going to have problems cutting players. I'm just going to have problems having to stop. That stopping from cutting them is what was going to be more of the issue. So there's just some players that you're just like, yeah, that's, thank you for your time filling out this 90-man roster, taking some snaps, and hopefully you can catch on somewhere, or even if it's in the UFL next spring. But we'll take your playbook now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that too, for me, I've told myself that this preseason, and I said this before the preseason even started. So this is before the 0-3 preseason. So, and if you want receipts, go back and listen to my Let's Ride podcast. I said it a million times, that it's not going to bring a lot of significance to me. The only way that I'm ever going to look back on this preseason and say, well, damn, that was significant, is if they pick up in week 1 and look the same way they have in the preseason, let's say on offense, or maybe issues on defense. But really, we haven't even seen the starting defense yet throughout these 3 preseason games. So for me, I'm taking this preseason with a giant grain of salt. And in week 1, if they go down to Atlanta and they score a bunch of points and they look completely different, then guess what? No one's going to look back on the preseason and say, well, yeah, but in the preseason they sucked. No one's going to say that.
We're not going to worry about it. We're not going to even think about it.
So I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to start with a clean slate. If Broderick Jones and the offensive line suck in Atlanta, then we could look back on the preseason and say, well, we could have seen this coming, but I don't want to do that until it's there in front of me. So we'll see. We're going to have everything covered for you at steelcurtainnetwork.com as it pertains to coverage in the next, 15 days?
15 days.
15 days. So we're going to
15 days from now, we'll be doing a post-game show from an actual game where the end result matters.
Yes. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what moves are made. So as cutdowns happen on Tuesday, we're going to have you covered there. We're going to have steelcurtainnetwork.com daily coverage there in the written word, our podcast platform, which is more than just what you see on YouTube or on Facebook. So go check us out wherever you get your podcast by searching Steel Curtain Network or Steelers. You'll find us. You can subscribe, follow for free. It doesn't cost anything, but you don't want to miss like my Let's Ride podcast Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Dave's Pittsburgh Standard Time on Thursdays, Brian's Bad Language, all that good stuff. But Dave, what else you want to say?
I would say we can do a couple teases. Pay attention now that the preseason's done. We've got some of you might be asking for it that know, and those of you that don't know, you'll get the information. Going to have a nice little contest coming up. Also, got to tease a little bit, Jeff. Big sponsorship coming around this week. People keep an eye out. We got
Yeah.
something big.
I'll say it. It's DraftKings.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know how fluid to say it. Yeah. So
yeah.
Don't do DraftKings now. Wait until we tell you that it's
Survivor League. Dave's gonna have the
Yep.
Survivor League coming out this week, so you guys can get signed up, win yourself a cool little item. We'll save that. We are going to have some DraftKings sponsorships in the first part of the season. Hopefully things go well. You're going to hear us talk about DraftKings odds and all that good stuff. So big things for the Steel Curtain Network. Hope you check us out, steelcurtainnetwork.com. But that does it for us. The preseason is over. The next time we have a post-game show will be when games really count. Let's hope for the best. Dave, as always, thanks for your time, man. Appreciate it.
We'll see you, Jeff.
Steel Curtain Network. Get it.
Everybody else gets a little tight.